Fallout, a post-nuclear role-playing game. Released in 1997 for DOS, Windows, and the Mac by Interplay, this is easily my favorite franchise that takes place in a post-apocalyptic setting. Considered to be a spiritual successor to Wasteland, one of Interplay's previous games, it's not hard to see the similarities between the two. We'll get into those later, but right now, I just want to get started right into the game. I've already talked about the intro to this game, but I want to talk about it again, even if I'm just repeating myself.
War. War never changes. The Romans waged war to gather slaves and wealth. Spain built an empire from its lust for gold and territory. Hitler shaped a battered Germany into an economic superpower. But war never changes.
This intro never fails to get me immersed into the experience. The story is that in the year 2077, nuclear war broke out between the major nations. It wasn't long before the Earth was reduced to cinders. But your family took shelter in a vault, more specifically Vault 13.
Your family was part of that group that entered Vault 13. Imprisoned safely behind the large vault door, under a mountain of stone, a generation has lived without knowledge of the outside world. Life in the vault is about to change.
This is where the RPG goodness begins, starting with the special system. It's an acronym for Strength, Perception, Endurance, Charisma, Intelligence, Agility, and Luck. These will determine your skills throughout the entire game. Whether it's lockpicking, melee weapons, guns, or just a speech skill, you can customize your character pretty much to your heart's content here. You can also give yourself a couple of optional traits, even though they all have a trade-off to them. So most of the time, I normally just pick Bloody Mess because that trait is just awesome and it's probably my favorite out of the whole franchise. When you're done creating your character, you are greeted by an awesome late 90s PC game cutscene.
Ah, you're here. Good. We've got a problem. A big one. The controller chip for our water purification system has given up the ghost. Can't make another one, and the process is too complicated for a workaround system. Simply put, we're running out of drinking water. No water, no vault. This is crucial to our survival. And frankly, I think you're the only hope we have. You need to go find us another controller chip. We estimate we have 4 to 5 months before the vault runs out of water. We need that chip. We marked your map with the location of another vault. Not a bad place to start, I think. Look, just be safe. Okay?
Dude, I just love these late 90s video game cutscenes, you know, whether they be on the PlayStation, Sega Saturn, or the PC. They just have a really cool sense of charm to them that is unmatched by anything else. I mean, for one, it's from a different time, and I think that's something that has to do with it. Even the worst CG cutscenes from this era, they still just have this really awesome feel to them. So charming and awesome. I don't know what else to say about it. It's just that great. But before you go save the vault and get the water chip and everything, you gotta go through this first cave full of giant rats. You can either sneak by them or kill them. Seeing how killing them is much more fun to me, let's talk about the combat. The combat in Fallout is a turn-based system that centers on using action points. While you're in combat, you'll notice that everything you do takes action points, and I really do mean everything. Opening your inventory, reloading, moving, and attacking enemies takes away action points. I think now is a good time to talk about some of the similarities between this and Wasteland. For one, they're both turn-based. While the system is a little different here than it is in Wasteland, it is almost the same. Another thing, though, is the difficulty. Good God, these games are just absolutely brutal, to the point where they're almost unfair. Just look at this part here where I have to fight 6 rad scorpions at once. I didn't go off the beaten path. This is where you need to go for the main quest of the game, the second location you discover. And yet, I'm just getting annihilated right off the bat. I won't lie, I'm not the biggest fan of turn-based combat because I don't feel like I'm in control. When I miss a shot in a first-person shooter, I know it's my fault. But when I have to rely on chance and miss, I feel cheated. Don't get me wrong, turn-based combat can be really tense. A huge example I always think of, for me personally, is when I played Wild Arms and I got to the first boss in that game. The first major boss when all 3 characters are together. That was tense, and I can totally see how it's very captivating. But here, in Fallout, for some reason, I find it to be very unsatisfying. It's sad, because I love everything else about this game. But I can't play it for very long because I get sick of the combat. I don't want to play a game knowing it's going to piss me off. Even if you turn the difficulty down, it still kicks your ass. And since we're on things I don't like about this game, let's move on to the inventory management. Let me put it this way. Think of the most tedious / obnoxious thing that you have to do. Now imagine doing that every 2 minutes for about 2 hours. It would drive you crazy. And that's how I feel about the inventory management here in Fallout. Having to painstakingly click on arrows just to see what I have in my inventory is just painful. Why couldn't they show it all on the screen at once? It makes the inventory feel smaller and more claustrophobic than it needs to be. I also want to mention that there is a time limit at the very beginning of the game. You have 150 days to get the water chip, but if you don't get the water chip in the 150 days, everyone in your vault dies and the game just ends, which kind of sucks because I really wish you could just leave it alone instead and just go out and do your own thing. But first, you have to do that. Alright, that's enough of me ripping on the game, because everything else about this game is just awesome. Please look past my problems because the rest of it is so good. The first thing I want to talk about are the graphics. I am just in love with the way this game looks. I'm a sucker for 90s PC games because I think they look so cool. They're unlike anything else, and even though it's kind of hard to describe, if you've played these games, you probably know what I'm talking about. I also love the isometric perspective in this Fallout. All the little details in the environments and the art style are just gorgeous. It has a very nice feeling that the first-person Fallout games don't really have, even though I personally prefer those games. I also love all the little details in the environments and the dialogue settings and the way the characters look. It pulls me into it in a way that other Fallout games don't. I'm not saying better or worse, just different. Another thing that's just wonderful is the soundtrack. This is easily my favorite soundtrack out of the whole franchise. It creates this chilling atmosphere that I don't really feel in any other game in this series. As much as I love Fallout 3 and 4's soundtracks, they don't make me feel the way this one does, and I think I know why. The first soundtrack is very ambient, utilizing soothing sounds rather than actual instruments. It creates this very unsettling tone. It creates the perfect atmosphere for this game. You know, if you're going to have a game set in the post-apocalypse, it needs to have the right atmosphere. And all the Fallout games have it, but this one in particular is it's just one of a kind. I also love the whole lore of Fallout. No other game balances dark humor and the darker side of life better than Fallout does. And I'm really into both things, so this is kind of like a match made in heaven for me in a way. There's also tons of little goofy things in the game too, which I'm in love with. But some of my other favorite things gotta be the references to movies like Mad Max. I mean, if you're gonna reference anything post-apocalyptic, Mad Max is the thing to go with, in my opinion. You can find his jacket in the game, and you can even have a dog as your companion. One thing I want to mention is that while I do prefer the later games like Fallout 3, 4, and New Vegas, there is a certain charm that this game has that those ones don't. I don't know exactly what it is, but I can kind of compare it to the Bungie Halo games, compare it to the 343 Halo games. The Bungie games have a sort of feeling and charm that the latter ones are lacking. But hey, maybe in 5 years they will start to have their own charm. But only time will tell. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in another video.